known as Global North, it is common for nations to have paternalistic or neo-colonial attitudes when it comes to developing countries or the Global South. Citizens of these Western countries are often unaware of the disastrous impacts these attitudes have.
Developing countries are not able to prosper with limiting factors like foreign aid,
Business control,
and lack of foreign relations and trade. These limiting factors have long-term effects on these developing countries, thus leaving them in a poverty state.
When thinking about foreign aid, it is often viewed in a positive light. However, it is actually harmful to the growth of these developing nations.
Looking at development in terms of economic gain, financial aid actually has a negative correlation with the development of developing countries. In 1982, the percentage of aid within African countries soared to 9% and reaching an all-time high of 17% in 1994. The actual growth per capita in 1982 was 0.25% and reaching an all-time low of negative 0.42% in 1994. This was discovered by Anna Swanson, a New York Times reporter who focuses on economics. This holds back the development of the Global South and leaving it further behind than its counterpart, the Global North. This is because the more financial aid that the economy receives, the more dependent it relies on it, and thus leaving it to work less harder to create more jobs for its citizens.
Developing nations become dependent on foreign aid, making it kind of opioid to these recipient countries.
Examples of this can be found in Antigua. In Jamaica Kincaid's book, A Small Place, she testifies the struggles that Antigua faces when it declared itself independent from Britain. She also describes the economic and infrastructural downfalls that has happened. That roads haven't been paved since 1986, the library has been closed since 1974, and schools are so run down that tourists mistake them for bathrooms. Many of these infrastructure advantages created by neocolonialism has negative impacts and one being due to the nation lost its aid.
Furthermore, a business lawyer, Jonathan Lee, noticed that in the 50s and 60s, there was a massive U.S. wheat dumping in India that resulted in the bankrupting of thousands of Indian farmers. George Dunlop, chief of staff of the Senate Agriculture Committee, speculated that such food aid may be responsible for millions of Indians starving.
This demonstrates how toxic dumping of foreign aid actually have negatively impact the local agriculture industry, therefore making citizens suffer even more.
Foreign and financial aid have been attributed to the lack of growth within different countries' infrastructures and economic systems.
This hurts the citizens and the economy by ruining jobs, overflowing the economy, and making countries dependent on foreign aid.
Just like foreign aid, the Global North has a certain attitude toward businesses. For example, the West interprets the word sweatshops with negativity and paternalistic attitudes. Sweatshops are presumed to be unethical and harmful to people of these developing countries. However, sweatshops may not be as unethical as expected. There are three main reasons why keeping these businesses in foreign countries would be beneficial. It creates jobs, raises pay for employees, and it provides an education.
Sweatshops are one of the biggest ways jobs are brought into these developing countries, and most of the time are the safest option provided to these citizens.
An example of this was given by Capstan, an author who specializes in foreign affairs.
In the 1990s, there was a massive ethics campaign held against big brands such as Nike and Reebok. These companies ran sweatshops manufacturing soccer balls in Pakistan, made by children. Later, the outlawing of child labor was enacted, and they removed their businesses in Pakistan.
Because of this, there was no job or education prospects for workers, especially women and children. Not only does it create jobs and provide an education for these workers, but it raises wages and economy.
In 2013, the minimum wage in America was $7.25, and it was $1.48 in Thailand, and it was 69 cents in the Philippines, and it was only 67 cents in China. This was pointed out by Annabelle Wong, who specializes in political theory and philosophy.
This is important because one of the main aspects is minimum wage for sweatshops that is effective. Michael J. Korn points out that by encouraging the raise in economy, even low-wage factories could lift everyone's wages. Korn also points out that by people competing to get these jobs, not competing to get these jobs, workers and employees will have to compete to get the jobs, therefore raising the labor pay. Therefore, taking these businesses out of developing countries would not only be unethical, it would be unfair to take away this option for jobs from citizens of these developing countries. Some businesses run their sweatshops unethically in these developing countries. However, there are some that strive to meet the ethical practices of these countries.
When an impoverished country receives foreign aid or is taken over by foreign business, it is very easy to conclude that their businesses will have a heavy hit in trade and international relations. Examples of this can be found in Haiti and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Haiti's economy during the Second World War was heavily influenced by America. This was pointed out by Noam Chomsky, a professor at MIT. He shows how President Roosevelt actually started destroying much of Haitian agriculture by focusing the exports to rubber, which was in such high demand at this time. This destroyed much of the uniqueness of Haitian agriculture exports.
This is unethical for countries to change economics for personal gain, leaving them in a state where they are unable to control their own trading system.
Just as well, the Congo has very little business itself. According to Vivian Walt and Sebastian Meyer, nearly 80% of the Congo's income is sourced from cobalt exports. By the same authors, it's been found that nearly 60% of cobalt around the world is sourced from the Congo and used by companies such as Volkswagen, Apple, Samsung, and many other car and electronic manufacturers. Cobalt is necessary for modern technological advancement and every lithium-ion battery ever made. If cobalt could not be sourced from the Congo, modern technological advancement around the world may halt altogether.
And yet, Congo remains one of the poorest countries in the world, despite being one of the most integral countries to modern technological advancements.
This is largely due to the distribution of business within the Congo. Congolians rely almost wholly on cobalt, however they don't run most of the business within the Congo. They sell directly to foreign traders instead of to local or national businesses. Therefore, they sell to foreign traders instead of to national or local businesses, which decreases the amount of control that the Congo has within the country for their own business.
Looking at this video, it's a great example of how neocolonial and paternalistic views are embedded into the Western culture by promoting the ideology of helping countries and property.
This has become a problem due to the fact that the more citizens believe in something, the more normalized it becomes, therefore making a stable support system for this type of view.
After reviewing all of our research, we have found a few solutions that we could put into play to change the paternalistic and neocolonial attitudes the West has towards developing countries, such as
Cut down on toxic dumping of foreign aid,
change the way as businesses such as sweatshops are viewed in the West,
and cracking down on foreign trade policies for developing countries.
overdumping of aid has bleak effects on nations' economy. In 2016, Iraq received $5.3 billion in financial aid. This was reported by Raul, a reporter at HowMuch.net. Despite that, Iraq was labeled the 44th poorest country in the same year. If aiding countries lowered the amount of money that they spend on financial aid, there would be a radicalized change within the recipient's country and more spending money to the aiding country.
By changing the way businesses are viewed, we can create a neutral opinion about multinational corporations, causing a more balanced ethics policy. The problem is many major influences like CNN are putting out articles like Cuba's unnoticed child workers and only broadcasting the negative side. If the West starts to look at and advertise both sides, we could see both the importance of these businesses and still be aware of all the cons.
And finally, the trade and international relations of the developing country. When a developing country is propped up with foreign aid and business propositions, it can destroy the existing economy and progression of the country, however damaged it already is. This leads to extreme poverty and a total lack of ability for citizens to progress within the economy. However, by focusing and cracking down on foreign trade policies and the amount of aid a business is allowed to have within the country, we can balance the growth of the economy and the assistance needed to keep it from failing nor from overflowing.
In the West, it is common for nations to have paternalistic and neocolonial attitudes towards developing countries. However, the effects that they have on the global South is not common knowledge. It creates negative impacts on the global South using things such as careless dumping of foreign aid, taking away job opportunities, and controlling international affairs. Foreign aid breaks down the economic growth within these developing countries and also tears down the local businesses. This is the affecting the amount of development that's happening within these countries, thus creating a vicious cycle of dependency on foreign aid.
The paternalistic view in the West creates an ethical divide. It does not look at what it would be like if we let developing countries run their own businesses and instead takes over for them in making their decisions.
And being so loose with foreign trade policies destroys the ability of the country to make its own decisions on how it runs its business, and therefore how it works with other countries to prosper. Having no limits, countries like the Congo can provide such essential elements as cobalt to the world while still remaining one of the poorest countries in the world, because multinational businesses have a monopoly on the trade and prevent local businesses from flourishing.
We believe that changing the paternalistic and neocolonial attitudes in the global North could have a major impact of the positive growth on the global South.
Madison. Give one specific way that your thinking changed as a result of learning about Marcello's findings.
One specific way that my thinking changed due to Marcello's findings was the way he looked at all of these different economic differences in the countries and how different development is skewed by a lot of foreign aid and businesses that you wouldn't even think affect these certain types of growth in the countries.
Marcello, reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem your group identified?
Reflecting over my colleagues' work, which... Can you repeat the question?
Reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact of your overall understanding of the problem your group identified? Which of your colleagues had the most impact on your understanding of the problem?
One of my colleagues that had the most impact of like my research, I guess, is Madison, and it's because basically going through and talking about sweatshops, a lot of people and like news outlets always see sweatshops in a negative view, and basically turning around and seeing like the statistics about how sweatshops are actually beneficial to the citizens in developing countries, it actually changed my view on how sweatshops are perceived and seeing like both the beneficial and the negative sides of it.
Mason, what was the strongest counter-argument to the solution or conclusion your team identified, and why?
One of our big solutions was... Could you repeat the question?
Sure. What was the strongest counter-argument to the solution or conclusion your team identified, and why?
Man, good question. I just really like. A big counter argument we had was that, especially with sweatshops, it doesn't really seem ethical at all to force people to work for such low wages, working such hard jobs. You know, wasn't it like 69 cents in Thailand, 67 in China? It's really low wage considering how much we're getting for much easier jobs in America. But like Madison pointed out, it really is a little more ethical because it's still a lot worse there than it is over here, which I guess is supposed perpetuating exactly what we're trying to avoid with the paternalistic attitudes, but it's a fact nonetheless.